Tonight, Nicola Sturgeon on her life, Brexit and independence.
Basically, what we're now being told is, shut up, Scotland, because nobody in the rest of the UK is interested in what you want to say.
Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood tells us her vision for Wales.
Having that team of Plaid Cymru MPs in Westminster to defend Wales and our people is essential.
And Caroline Lucas tells us what the Greens can do for the country.
There are plenty of very big divisions between where the Labour Party is right now and where the Green Party is.
Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. Over the last few weeks, we've been speaking to the leaders of Great Britain's largest parties, and now, just a few days before we cast our votes, I speak to Nicola Sturgeon, leader of the Scottish National Party, about her party's role in Westminster and the future of the Union. ITV Wales presenter Jonathan Hill interviews Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood, and ITV's political correspondent Libby Vina meets the co-leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas. These interviews were recorded before the terrorist attack in London on Saturday night.
Nicola Sturgeon, leader of the SNP, has taken the UK political scene by storm. She's been called the second most powerful woman in Britain. But the First Minister of Scotland had humble beginnings. She grew up in a council house in Dreghorn, southwest Scotland. Her father was an electrician and her mother a dental nurse, and from an early age it was clear their daughter stood out from the crowd.
She was always a very determined child. At the age of 5, she announced she was going to be a lawyer, which is quite a strange thing for a 5-year-old to do.
True to her word, Sturgeon went on to study law at the University of Glasgow. She was equally precocious when it came to politics.
Well, thank you, John.
Aged 21, Sturgeon became the SNP's youngest candidate. Elected as MSP 7 years later, she rose to Deputy First Minister at the age of 36.
Those in the SNP who've been with her would maybe say that at the beginning she was probably quite spiky, she was quite feisty. But if you're a female in politics, you don't get anywhere by being soft and cuddly. You very quickly have to become quite steely.
In 2010, Sturgeon married long-term partner Peter Murrell, chief executive of the SNP. In 2014, she received a blow to her ambitions, finding herself on the losing side of the Scottish independence referendum. But she bounced back, becoming leader of the SNP and First Minister, the first woman to hold both posts. In last year's European referendum, Scotland voted by 62% to remain in the EU, a fact Sturgeon believed changed the debate over Scotland's future in the UK.
I think an independence referendum is now highly likely.
In March this year, Sturgeon went on the political offensive, demanding a second independence referendum.
Yes, 69, no, 59. There were no abstentions. The motion as amended is therefore agreed.
But some argue that her focus on the constitutional question is to the detriment of everything else.
She came to power determined to change things in Scottish education. She was determined to close the gap between poor kids and rich kids in schools. Now you get the sense that that purpose has been squandered somewhat. You know, that by choosing to go for an independence referendum, she's jeopardised that agenda.
And with polls suggesting the country may not support a second independence referendum, the SNP's manifesto seems to be focusing primarily on policies that seek to challenge austerity. As the general election looms, could Sturgeon's dream of an independent Scotland be one step closer, or could the tide be turning away from Scottish nationalism?
Hello, nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Come and take a seat. Mind the microphone. Thank you. So, First Minister, good to see you again. Do you think 2015 was peak Sturgeon?
I don't know. I hope not. 2015 was certainly an exceptional result for the SNP. There's no denying that. You know, to win 56 out of 59 constituencies is not the kind of result that happens every day. So, it's a tough act to follow. I don't mind admitting that.
What would the little girl from the council house in Dreghorn make of that? I mean, you're on the list of the most powerful women in the world.
Yeah,
now.
I mean, the little girl from Dreghorn is still in here, and probably very much so. I mean, I know it doesn't look it, but very much so. And I guess from my perspective, that's not how it has necessarily felt. I've been in Parliament since 1999, so it didn't feel such a sudden explosion onto the scene as it may have appeared to be for other people.
Let's talk about the politics of this election, which was brought upon all of us as a surprise. How is it that a manifesto of a party whose defining purpose is independence barely mentions it in a manifesto?
Here we go. I spend almost every day being accused by some people of talking about independence to the exclusion of everything else, and being accused by other people of not talking about it enough. And the reality is my position on this is clear. I think at the end of the Brexit process, not right now, but at the end of the process, when we know what Brexit means, people in Scotland should have a choice about our future, because the alternative to that is that we just have Brexit imposed on us no matter how damaging it's going to be.
Let me take from your manifesto. You said whether you voted Leave or Remain, yes or no, vote SNP to give you a mandate to demand a place for Scotland at the Brexit negotiating table so we can work to keep Scotland in the single market. So they would vote to give you a place at a negotiating table to which you have not been invited.
Well, again, Theresa May is the one that has called an election. Now, presumably you call an election to get the views of the Scottish people. We put forward...
Yeah, but you're offering something that you can't deliver. You have not got a place at the negotiating table.
But if people in Scotland vote SNP, it strengthens my hand to say to Theresa May, Scotland, and not just Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland must have a greater say.
But she's already ruled that out, and so have the EU Commission.
But this is not about the EU Commission, with the greatest respect. This is about Theresa May and the UK government.
The negotiations are due to start 11 days after the general election. There is no prospect of you having a place at that negotiating table on the terms of that the Prime Minister has made abundantly clear.
To be a part of the shaping and development of the UK's negotiating position.
You specifically said at the Brexit negotiating table. That's the words of your manifesto. You have not got a place at that table.
If the SNP wins this election, it strengthens my hand to demand that Scotland's voice is heard in that process.
It might strengthen your demand, but it doesn't get you a place at that table.
Well, so basically, what you're saying to me, and I know you're only putting it to me as an interviewer, is that Scotland basically has to just sit back, accept we voted to remain.
Yes, but that's because Scotland's part of the United Kingdom.
So that, in a sense, underlines the position we're in just now. We voted to remain. We voted to stay in the UK.
Democratically settled position.
Let me just explain the position Scotland finds itself in. In 2014, we were told if we voted yes, we would imperil our place in the EU. So Scotland voted no to, amongst other things, to protect its place in the EU. In 2016, we were told to vote remain to protect our place in the EU. We did that. We were then told that the UK is a family of nations and Scotland's voice would be heard, that the Prime Minister wouldn't trigger Article 50 until there had been a UK position. So basically what we're now being told is, shut up, Scotland, because nobody in the rest of the UK is interested in what you want to say.
What about if Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister? Would he give you a place at the Brexit negotiating table? Have you asked him?
No, I haven't. But, I look at the polls, and even with narrowing polls, I think the likelihood is the Tories are going to be in government. That's why it's so important at this election that we make sure that our voice is heard.
There may be a way of making that voice strengthened, and that is if we do end up in a situation whereby you could support Jeremy Corbyn, SNP could fall in with Labour if there's no overall majority. Would you be prepared to support him as Prime Minister?
I've made my position clear. I've said the same in this election as I said in 2015, but there is an important difference in this election, which I'll come on to in a second. If the arithmetic after the election supported a progressive alliance that kept the Tories out of office, I would want to be part of that, not in formal coalitions, but part of that progressive alliance.
Would you support him as Prime Minister?
Look, I don't think Jeremy Corbyn is going to be in a position where the parliamentary arithmetic lends itself to that.
It may end up in that position, and in that position, people need to know at this moment of national pressure whether you would support him in office.
What I would want to do is be part of a progressive alliance, and I would be working to get as much of the progressive SNP manifesto implemented as possible.
Do you think the United Kingdom will have broken up by 2025?
I think Scotland will be independent, yes. But, that's a choice for the Scottish people. I believe...
So
I've
think
always
by
believed,
2025?
Look, you're putting arbitrary dates in my... I believe Scotland will be independent. I've always believed that. You also use language that, it's very pejorative. Something will have broken. Scotland will just move from being a devolved country to an independent country. But those links and relationships that hold the British Isles as an entity will continue.
Nicola Sturgeon, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
And now ITV Wales presenter Jonathan Hill interviews the Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood about her life, policies and vision for Wales.
Leanne Wood is an unusual party leader because she represents the same community where she was born, raised and still lives. She grew up in a terraced house here in Penygraig, a former mining village in the Rhondda Valley. She went to the local comprehensive school at a time when the community found itself on the front line of the 1984 miners' strike. Wood's beliefs were taking shape and found expression during her visits to her local youth club.
I think what stood out about Leanne was her desire to get to know things, to understand things, interested in subjects that she would never have thought of discussing. I suppose one of the things that she was one of the young people who wanted to change the world.
After leaving school, Wood worked in a local factory, an experience that persuaded her to return to college. She started to get involved in politics, choosing Nationalist Party Plaid Cymru over Labour.
When she got to university, she said that she saw the Labour Party full of old men with a sense of entitlement that had no interest in anything that she had to say. She saw Plaid Cymru full of young people, women, with a similar outlook to her.
Wood was elected a member of the Welsh Assembly in 2003, where her Republican views got her into trouble after referring to the Queen as Mrs. Windsor.
Mrs. Windsor's speech will not address this risk.
And I would be grateful if Leanne Wood could withdraw that remark on grounds of discourtesy.
I dispute the fact that it is discourteous, Presiding Officer.
Well, you can't dispute, that's my ruling.
In 2005, she gave birth to a daughter, Cerys, and rose through the ranks of her party, becoming its first ever female leader in 2012.
Plaid Cymru is Leanne Wood.
Taking part in the TV leaders' debates at the last general election raised her party's profile. But the surge of nationalist support enjoyed by her friend Nicola Sturgeon failed to materialise in Wales. At this election, Wood is hoping for more targeted success.
If Plaid Cymru manages to increase the number of seats it has, and up until now it has only had 3, it's talking up its hopes in 5, 6, 7 more. You could see Plaid Cymru MPs taking part in some kind of alliance. The price for Leanne Wood for taking part in any kind of coalition at Westminster would be more devolution, more power for the Welsh Assembly and the Welsh Government, and ultimately independence.
Nice to see you. Hi, come on in.
Hi.
See. Leanne, there's been a lot of criticism in recent years about people who are almost bred into politics without much life experience. That's not something that could be said of you. You've had tough times.
Yeah, I think I've had a range of experiences. Some have been more difficult times than others, there's no doubt about that. But I think that helps me to empathise and to relate to people now and to think about all those aspects of problems that people can face while formulating policies.
At the last election, despite all the talk of a surge in nationalist support, you're more or less flatlined with 3 seats, 12% of the vote. If that happens again, and polls suggest it could, do you think you would question your own leadership?
I'm here to stay. I was elected 5 years ago as leader of Plaid Cymru on a programme to build up the Welsh economy and transform our country. That job is still ongoing.
You said you wouldn't rule out a coalition with Labour if it was a viable option after the next election. Do you think Jeremy Corbyn as leader would make a more palatable prospect for you than a more centre-left leader, perhaps?
I can't see any conditions under which Plaid Cymru would be in coalition with Labour after this election. Everything that I can see indicates that Theresa May is going to win in England. The question for us in that scenario is what happens to Wales. And so having that team of Plaid Cymru MPs in Westminster to defend Wales and our people is essential.
Let's talk about Brexit. More than 52% of people in Wales voted to leave the EU. In your area, in the Rhondda, it was even higher. Your manifesto is silent on the question of a second referendum on a deal. What's your position?
We accepted the referendum result on the day that it was announced, and we've not backtracked from that at all. We want the different governments within the UK to be able to vote on that final deal. At the moment, Theresa May is seeking a mandate so that she can pursue the most extreme Brexit. She's not put in Welsh jobs, the agricultural industry, the higher education sector in Wales. She's not putting those matters at the top of her agenda.
You've said you want a national debate on Welsh independence, even though around only 6% of people in Wales are in favour of this. Why?
What we've said was that if Scotland becomes an independent country, and given the people in Scotland voted to remain in the European Union, then in all likelihood people in Scotland will have another referendum and they could vote to leave the UK. Under those circumstances, the UK no longer exists. And what we need to do then in Wales is have a full discussion about our future as a nation.
Isn't it just the case that you're using the Brexit arguments to further your political ambitions of Wales leaving the UK?
People in June last year voted to take back control. And if they voted to take back control from the European Union, then surely it's a case of wanting to be much more in control of your own life and your own destiny. And I think Plaid Cymru has got quite a lot to say on that front.
Leanne Wood, thank you very much indeed.
Finally, ITV's political correspondent Libby Venus speaks to the Green Party's co-leader Caroline Lucas about her career and her policies. This interview was recorded before the terrorist attack in London on Saturday night.
As her party's sole MP and its first ever leader, Caroline Lucas is for many of us the face of the Greens. But who is the person behind the politician? Married with 2 grown-up sons, Lucas had a conventional upbringing. She was raised in Worcestershire by Conservative voting parents and attended a private girls' school in Malvern. After university, she joined the Greens, becoming the party's press officer and co-chair.
When you're speaking at microphones, could you remember to identify yourselves very clearly with your name and local party?
She was elected a councillor and MEP before being selected as the Greens leader.
We're no longer the party of socks and sandals. Caroline does come across as very professional, someone who you could have a drink with in your local pub. Caroline is very easy for a large number of people, I think, to relate to.
Here we are! In 2010, she was elected an MP. But Britain's first Green lawmaker soon got into trouble with the police. She was arrested along with her son during an anti-fracking protest.
The government isn't listening. Climate change is the greatest threat that we face.
In 2012, she took a break from the leadership, but she returned last year, this time as joint leader of her party alongside Jonathan Bartley.
We're incredibly proud to be the first leaders of a political party in this country to be job sharing.
In 2015, the Greens won their highest ever number of votes at a general election, but Lucas remained their only MP. This time around, she's called for a progressive alliance between the parties of the left, an electoral pact to maximise their chances of beating Conservative candidates. It's a tactic Lucas hopes could treble the number of Green MPs.
They need a progressive alliance, so she needs to be able to get Labour to stand aside in a couple of key seats so that they got from 1 to 3. Now, what you notice is the party leaderships, apart from Caroline Lucas, the Labour and the Lib Dems are completely dead against it, but their local parties are going against them anyway.
And although her calls for cross-party collaboration have only been reciprocated in one constituency, Lucas hopes this spirit of cooperation will help end her status as the only Green on the Green benches of the House of Commons.
Hello.
Thank you very much for coming along. If you had to point to something in your life that shows that you live by the values that you espouse, what would you suggest?
Wow. Let me just say, first of all, that I am not trying to regulate how people live their lives. What I'm trying to do is to make it easier for people to make more environmentally sound choices. So I guess I use public transport wherever I can, not exclusively. Family has a car. I'm a vegetarian. But, the Green Party is not about setting standards to make other people feel that, either they're not good enough or whatever. The Green Party is about changing political structures rather than somehow standing in judgment on other people.
Isn't one of your biggest problems, though, that the Labour Party has moved to the left? They've effectively stolen some of your green clothes. It looks like you now are recycling Labour policies.
We're very glad that Labour has now caught up with us on getting rid of tuition fees, on bringing rail back into public ownership. But there are plenty of very big divisions between where the Labour Party is right now and where the Green Party is. When it came to Brexit, sadly, Labour went absent without leave. They were just not being the opposition that we needed them to be. We've got a 4-day week we haven't got onto yet. We've got a universal basic income.
I was going to ask you about the 4-day week.
These are things that people want. And in the 21st century, we should be asking some questions about what is the future of work in this country.
What evidence is there that people actually want a 4-day working week?
Have you asked your friends?
Wages have stagnated over the last 7 years. How could people possibly afford to work just 4 days and make ends meet?
It's already happening in some private companies. They are already attracting people to work for them, not by increasing the wages beyond a certain level, but by saying, for example, in 1 weekend in 4, you can have a long weekend. People value that. They want more time with their families. They want more time to themselves.
You have suggested in the past that you want much stricter laws on air pollution, that you want to actually have much higher road tax for people who are driving diesels. There's some in your party who've suggested that it could go up to £800, for example, for a family car. Isn't that a punitive amount that no one would really support, no one in their right mind could afford to pay?
Air pollution is a public health emergency, that it is linked to the premature deaths of 40,000 people in this country. So that is the context within which we need some far-reaching action. On your particular point of the 800, that is only for new vehicles, so it's about people who are making the choice.
It's a huge amount, though, isn't it? I mean, can you really expect people to cough up £800 for a family car?
We don't want them to have to do that, which is why we are also suggesting that there should be a one-off levy on the car manufacturers in order to make sure you've got that money there to be able to be used for scrappage schemes and so forth.
Turning to foreign policy, you've talked about diplomatic solutions to the problem of terrorism in the Middle East, the problem of ISIS. In the wake of what's happened in Manchester, do you think that is still a valid approach, or do you think that you need to start re-examining where you stand on those issues?
I don't particularly recognise the picture of us saying that we would take only diplomatic measures. I mean, of course, if you're asking me, does it help conflict solutions in the Middle East to up the stakes of violence, there's plenty of evidence and plenty of concern from all parties that usually isn't the most effective way forward. Am I saying that I think there's going to be someone from ISIS with whom we can sit down in the near future? I would love to think so, but I can't see it happening right now. What I can see and what I would hope to see...
Many people would find that pretty controversial, pretty upsetting, that you would be prepared to sit down with ISIS.
We need to end the atrocities that are being perpetrated by ISIS and by other terrorist groups. I think what's happened in Manchester, in other parts of Europe and beyond in recent years, is the height of abomination. I detest it. It's unspeakable. But then we have to ask, well, how do we solve it? So if you were asking me, in theory, if there were a person that represented ISIS, and this is a big leap of imagination, but if there were, would you not talk to them? I think it would be the height of irresponsibility not to have some conversations with them, to work out how we can roll back this terrible tide of violence that is going on.
Caroline Lucas, thank you very much.
Thank you. The Green Party stressed again to us yesterday that it utterly opposes so-called Islamic State and its ideology, and that they believe there is no way of talking to them at present, but that it was critical to pursue diplomatic solutions. Now, if you'd like more information on tonight's programme, just visit our website at itv.com/tonight. Until next time, good evening and thanks for watching.
Ken's getting the family round for a heart-to-heart next. There could be trouble ahead back in Coronation Street. This week, with the results from 9:55 in the evening, be here for the ITV News Election 2017 Live this Thursday night.